Welcome to today's tactic, where we're diving into a critical issue that can make or break your team success. The common symptoms of the lack of accountability. This is an extension of the previous video and podcast, and I want to take a little deeper dive into these symptoms. Let me ask you, have you noticed a dip in morale or maybe inconsistent performance within your sales team? If so, you're not alone. See it all the time. But these could be signs that accountability is slipping through the cracks. You don't mean to. It happens. So that's the whole purpose of me reminding you of this whole topic, and that sometimes even successful teams start to slip. They start to slip. This accountability starts to slip between the cracks. It lowers and lowers until you've got a problem. In this video, we're going to explore how a lack of accountability directly impacts your team's performance, while morale can plummet, and most importantly, how to turn things around. You want to know this, how to turn things around to drive consistent positive results. And by the end, you'll walk away with actionable insights to re-energize yourself and especially your team, boost your commitment, and ensure everyone is pulling in the same direction towards success. And as a sales manager, it can be, let's call it incredibly challenging to accurately judge your own performance amid the whirlwind of daily responsibilities, tactics, team dynamics, fires that you're having to put out. You're constantly juggling. You're constantly juggling the demands of hitting your sales goal, managing your team members, responding to the boss, upper management. That makes it really easy to get caught up in the vortex of overlooking whether you're truly fostering accountability within your team. And common causes of this include focusing too heavily on short-term results, living month to month, week to week. Maybe you had a bad day yesterday and you feel like you need to push the team to get better today. Or maybe failing to take a step back to assess long-term team health. How healthy is your team? Easy to lose track of that. And to improve, it's important, essential, to stop and reflect on how well you're creating accountability. Rarely will they take that upon their own shoulders and march off with it. It's going to be entirely up to you. And one way to make that assessment is to regularly review individual and team performance data. And you want to look for patterns of inconsistency or lack of engagement. Lack of engagement takes on multiple forms, but there's somebody that used to be at an acceptable level, if not a good level, and they're starting to trail off. It's amazing how sometimes little things can trigger a good performer and you'll never know about it. And that trigger creates negative behaviors, negative attitude, lack of motivation. Regularly review your numbers. Your answers are always in the data. Another way is to solicit honest feedback. Honest feedback. Maybe even employ a service to give you 360 feedback, anonymous 360 feedback. I've got a great system for that. There's lots of them out there. They're very cost effective. And let me tell you, it's eye-opening because many managers fool themselves by saying, oh, I've got a really good relationship with my team. If there was something wrong, they come tell me. We're buds. They got my back. And I'm sure in many cases they do, but they're not going to give you feedback. It's the rare individual who will give good, honest feedback to their boss. It's pretty rare out there that even bosses, maybe your boss, is giving you honest feedback. They're busy too. And there's often a gap in giving feedback that helps one get better at the job. Think about that. Or if you have a trusted source that you think if you will sit down in private with them and ask them, letting them know it's safe, that nothing punitive can come from this conversation, then let me know where I stand. And just let them talk, ask questions, lots of open-ended questions, be curious. And by the time you get 5 or 10 minutes into this conversation, they'll start getting honest with you. It's crucial you know how you're performing. Really difficult to determine that yourself. But here's the real issue. Your team's performance is a direct reflection of your leadership. You've heard me say that many times. And making time to assess and adjust your approach will help you ensure accountability is priority. I'm pretty certain that at time to time you're giving your team feedback. How are you getting the feedback you need to understand whether you're on the mark or not? Now, how do I know whether I have a level of low accountability? Here's some common symptoms. Some of these are insidious devils. They creep up on us and we don't realize it until it's happened and now I've got to dig out of a hole. So catching these things early, super important. Number one, most common, may come as a surprise to some, is low team morale. When individuals on a sales team feel they're not being held accountable for their actions, it leads to poor performance and it leads to low morale. They can end up taking less pride in their work or feel that their contributions aren't valued or that they're not getting a sense of direction that they need, or others are getting away with things that they don't get away with. That kills morale and performance. And this lack of investment, and it is investment in the team's success, can result and will result in poor performance and ultimately diminishing sales. So low team morale is a data point that's checked by a diminishing level of sales. It's easy to come up with a million excuses, the economy, the competition, pricing, out of stocks, but somewhere in that litany of potential reasons, we'll call them, you've got to be looked at. So keep that in mind. Second thing you want to avoid is if your team is giving you inconsistent performance. See, a sales team that lacks standards and accountability and is frequently being fed back the data or the results or the positive reinforcement or developmental reinforcement, your team's going to give you inconsistent performance levels. Some team members may be naturally highly motivated, and we love them. And they, despite other things, will continue to deliver quality results. They're exceeding their targets. Meanwhile, others may glide by with minimal effort, and this is so common, it's human nature. They'll do just enough to not get yelled at. They'll do just enough to keep their job. And very often they will fail or only come close to their objectives. And depending on what that ratio is, generally there's Pareto's law, 80-20. And out of 10 people, you might have 2 that have that natural drive that you don't have to worry so much about. It's the 8 others that this is going to affect. When those 8 others are dropping, no matter how good the other 2 are, you're coming up short. As a result, the team as a whole cannot deliver consistent results month after month. That's going to drive you to pull your hair out. It's frustrating. This causes disruptions to your revenue, you hitting your goals, your bonuses, their commissions. And it certainly creates a difficult work environment because it's going to put pressure on you. And some of you have the proper mechanisms to handle this pressure. Many don't. It's really important that you take all the steps I'm about to share with you to prevent ever getting here. Here's a third one to think about. The lack of accountability can stifle sales and your team's growth and development, are they on a track of continuous improvement? Or are they flatlining? Is there more they should be getting you? What's your graph look like? Without accountability, there are no standards in place, and there's no benchmark for what's expected from your team members. We've talked about how important it is to daily give them feedback on how they're doing, to post it up so that they can see it. They know how to come to work and have a good day. And at the end of the day, they know whether they had a good day. And without that, without at the very minimum, your feedback and discussions with them on performance during the course of a day, there's a limited focus on results. Are you training them? Are you coaching them? Are you developing them? Well, if you're not doing all those on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, you're hindering both the top individuals and your poor performers individuals, thus your overall team's growth. Make sure you have standards that you benchmark, and the way to fix that is constantly coaching and training your team. If you're spending a lot of time putting out fires, you're going to think, oh, I don't have time for this. The fact is, you don't have time not to be doing these things because it's all about prevention. The fact that you aren't doing this at a level that's successful is the reason why you're fighting fires, why your boss is on your butt all the time. It's the reason why you're constantly disappointing your team is disappointing you, frankly. So keep that stress off of you. It's hard to handle. Here's another symptom: poor communication, poor coordination. When sales teams don't have accountability, it can and will lead to a lack of communication and coordination between them and you. They're getting surprised, you're getting surprises. The shipping department's getting surprises. Marketing is getting surprises. When each individual is accountable for their actions and they understand clearly what's expected of them, it fosters a culture of teamwork and collaboration. This in turn facilitates and requires better communication, better coordination. And if you've got a big mixed master of stuff going on, challenges, miscommunications, you've got an accountability issue. And you're not taking the steps to allow your team to function smoothly. There's always a symbiotic relationship to every organization with the sales team. Your team is responsible for achieving results, and everything else downstream's got to support those results. If there's a disruption in the force, inappropriate or poor communication, coordination, planning things out, getting ahead and letting people know what the next step is, that's a big sign of poor accountability. And fifth and final is decreased customer satisfaction. Are you tracking customer retention, client retention? Do you have a net promoter score for your sales team? Are you regularly surveying your customers and keeping the data point of how they're performing? If not, this could be creeping up on you and hurting you. How's your year-over-year existing account growth? Is it up? Is it down? If I'm losing clients, my growth isn't there, and I'm constantly relying on bringing in new customers to build sales, you got an accountability problem. Accountability is so critical in the sales process, and especially when it comes to customer satisfaction. They must know how customers must be treated, and they must know that we're measuring that. And if it's failing, if something's going wrong, that you, their coach, their supporter, they're stepping in and helping them out. You're not knocking them over the head with it. You're not getting overly aggressive. You're saying, oh, your customer service scores are dropping a little bit. What do you think? What might be handling? What might be causing that? What do you think you could do differently? What have you done in the past maybe you're not doing now? Keeping in mind that their first response is likely to blame something other than themselves. But almost always it's something they are or are not doing. And when you have salespeople failing to meet their targets, generally there's a customer satisfaction issue. caused by a lack of accountability. And that can have super severe consequences for your organization. And so you, from an accountability standpoint, must make sure that your team members, your organization, frankly, but your team members, for sure, that's what you're controlling, that's what you're in charge of, understand the importance of customer satisfaction and all the data that points to a good job or a poor job around customer satisfaction. And you must coach them to understand whether they're there or they're not. They're above the mark or below the mark. And if they're below, that you're giving them the tools and the coaching to get better at it. Or maybe you need to go to bat for them with some other department that's creating the issue. That's your role. And I hope you are measuring it. If you're not, it's really important that you do. All that said, this whole series is on how essential it is for sales managers to embrace accountability because, as I've mentioned over and over, it leads to higher levels of performance. This is the weird part that a lot of people don't realize until they're there. Increased motivation. And when you have that increased motivation, commitment, your overall success is going to rise. I've said often, you cannot allow your sales team to run amok. It's easy to do. Oh, they're just being salespeople. I can tell you after hundreds and hundreds of interactions with sales teams, the sales managers who have created the box, this is where you can walk up to. Many will walk up and look over the line, but they won't step over the line, but they need to know where the lines are drawn. Those are lines of accountability. Don't think for a minute, don't fool yourself that sales teams don't thrive under a culture of accountability. They love it. Sometimes they find it distasteful to be held accountable for certain things, but as long as it's fair, there's no favoritism, it's clear what's expected of them, and we're not surprising them with our feedback or our expectations. But without this box clearly defined, you're going to get low morale, inconsistent performance, poor communication, and your customers are going to be dissatisfied to some degree. However, when each team member takes responsibility for their actions, the team will function at its very best. And there's only really one person who can create that kind of culture. It's you, my friend. Proactive communication. Be proactive. You want to get in front of it. You want to make sure you have it in place before it happens. It's about fire prevention, not firefighting. And once again, I will repeat myself, that if you're constantly fighting the issues that are basically the outcomes of poor performance or underperformance, you got some accountability issues. And it's not so much you holding people accountable, it's about them realizing and understanding what they're being held accountable for. What are the rules? What are the standards? And then how do you communicate them? It's really hard to dig yourself out of a situation that's been created from poor accountability. But once you get there, it's a thing to behold. But if you know that there's issues coming, or very often in us is fight or flight or freeze, that I don't want to go address it now. I may make it worse, or I may make them mad and they'll quit. It is the very rare situation that will fix itself. They just don't. So don't hold off hoping the problem will fix itself. It won't. For example, very common, don't wait till the end of the month to see if they'll turn things around or an individual will turn things around. They won't. As soon as you see it, you need to alert them to it and start talking about it. Falling into a pattern, who knows what caused it, but it's your job to pull them out of it. Notice it early. Don't wait until the last week when they've had 3 lousy weeks in the month to say, oh my God, you got to close the gap. You suck. Not those words. If it happens, it's going to happen early in the month. Catch it then. Be studying your data. It's giving you the fire alarm that I need to do something about this. Don't wait to fix it. It will not fix itself. The data will give you the opportunity to correct course early. And that ensures that you as a leader are making sure your team stays on track and maximizes their potential. And in the case where you, as a salesperson, frequently seeking feedback, it's important to recognize that they may be fishing for compliments. Strike that, restart. In a case where you have a salesperson who's frequently seeking feedback, how am I doing? Or they're trying to beat their own chest, pat themselves on the back, get accolades from you. But if they're constantly asking for feedback, recognize that for what it is. They're fishing for compliments. They need some mechanism to boost their self-esteem. Embrace that. They need more reassurance and validation for their efforts. Not everybody needs that. But if you're going to get their full potential, you're accountable to give them what they need to be at maximum performance. And if they need a little more stroking and reassurance, pats on the back, give it to them. What's that going to hurt? Not everybody needs that. That individual needs that. And you must make sure that if you're giving developmental feedback where they're coming up short, it's got to be encouraging. It must be constructive. It's equally important to consider where you're giving them enough positive affirmation on a regular basis. And it's a sign that you're not if you have a salesperson or salespeople who are consistently seeking out your opinion. Sometimes that's a sign that they're not feeling confident. You want confidence in your sales team, so recognize your role in this. There's a lot of things you do during the course of the day, a lot of responsibilities you have. None is more important than what we're talking about here. None. It's your job to balance constructive feedback with genuine praise. And as I've said ad nauseum through this series, patting them on the back, giving them recognition is the rocket fuel to success. Don't take that away from them. Pump them up. Be the friendly patter on the backer. You need to ask yourself, are you offering enough encouragement? Are you really seeing the little wins? You're not waiting for the big number to be hit. You're talking about all the steps and giving them positive reinforcement, all the things that lead to the big number. The number of meetings they're having, the number of proposals they have out, how well they're doing on presentations. That gets us the big number. Make sure your KPIs are tied to behaviors, not just the number. And adjust your approach accordingly. It's not one size fits all. Everybody needs a different level of accountability, recognition, encouragement. But I got to tell you, even the best that kind of blow you off around patting them on the back, they like it. They like it a lot. So regularly acknowledging your team's strengths, the individual strengths, their successes, your team's successes, builds that confidence. And confidence is one of the major resources creating success. So you need to reduce their need for constant validation. And ultimately, that will help. They're going to perform better because their heads are in it. Remember, most of their success comes from between their ears. Hard to argue that. And by providing frequent, sincere affirmation, don't just say it, just say it. It needs to be genuine. You need to have the empathy. You need to have the mindset and the true appreciation in you to support their self-esteem. And that fosters a more confident, motivated, and resilient, because there's going to be potholes that we hit, a more resilient team and team members. On the flip side, it's really important for you to keep your coach's hat nearby, because if they're outside of the lines of the box, the standards, the expectations, you must hold them accountable. You need to be straightforward. You need to be transparent, but you also have to be encouraging. And please, if you have trouble with these kind of conversations, go to Amazon and find my book on the roadmap to difficult conversations and read that. It will give you the framework for how to structure your mindset, the meeting itself, and how to leave that meeting with some actionable outcomes to be expected. But please don't leave things unsaid. That is almost as bad as having a conversation inappropriately. But if you don't have any kind of conversation, you will always come up unaccomplished. So let's talk about rewarding again. Talked about it a lot in this series, but here's the value of rewarding responsibility and accountability. Yes, rewarding accountability. Now that you understand the reasoning and importance of accountability, got the box, I got the standards, I communicate them properly, I hold people accountable, I reward people for all that, I've got my box. Let's talk more about how to explore the real value of holding your sales team accountable. See, accountability isn't just a management tool, it's a powerful driver of performance, growth, success. And when you hold your team accountable, you set clear expectations. Everybody knows what's expected of them. That's the foundational element of a highly engaged, successful team, is they understand clearly what's expected of them. Written sales processes, written procedures, feedback on their KPIs daily, constant coaching, constant rewards. And when you put all that together and you're holding your team accountable and you're setting clear expectations, you foster a culture of responsibility and you empower your salespeople to take ownership of their results. And this only leads to higher individual performance. And it also builds a more cohesive and motivated team, an esprit de corps, one that strives for exceeding goals. There's nothing they can't do. They're confident. And the value of accountability extends far beyond immediate sales outcomes. It cultivates a team environment where every member long-term is committed to continuous improvement, which in turn drives innovation and long-term success. Your graph will be doing this. And by ensuring that each salesperson understands their role and is held consistently to standards, this foundation I talk about of understanding what's expected of me, that creates trust, respect, fairness, which is so important in salespeople. All that enhances team morale. It's incredible. And super easy. It doesn't cost you a dime, except your commitment to doing it, changing your habits, changing your approach, changing your thoughts, your style. And it's really about helping them realize their full potential. Your best coaches, whether executive coaches, sports coaches, they're always pushing you for more. Why? Because they know you have more. We all have more. And that's going to always result in higher performance, higher commissions, and a stronger, more resilient business. You're going to have highs and lows, but your lows will be higher. So recognizing, rewarding responsibility and accountability within your team, sales team, can really have a transformative effect on both performance and mindset. It makes your job easier. Wow, how's that for a motivator for you? Don't you want your job to get easier? This does. You may be doing it the hard way right now. If you're, again, fighting a lot of demons all day, every day, you're going from one problem to the next. They're so dependent and reliant on you. You've made yourself indispensable. That's a challenge. But what I've been talking about here, this approach, not only incentivizes high performance, but it fosters a culture of ownership. That ownership creates the situation where you're completely dispensable, not indispensable. They can operate without you. That makes your job easier. They make good decisions. They're self-motivating themselves. They understand what's expected of them. You don't have to constantly be on them to achieve results. It creates that inertia of esprit de corps and confidence and success, sustained success. Every industry is competitive. Every industry, especially in sales, has some level of pressure, if not very high pressure. It's sales. Why we ever got into it, I don't know, out of our minds. But it's fun. You're built for it. And so as a sales manager, you know, it's not just to call out negative behaviors, right? You didn't like that when you were a salesperson. You need to actively recognize and reward your team. And I talk about that a lot. But let me tell you, people naturally gravitate towards what is recognized and appreciated. Reward the behaviors you seek. So if you shine a light on what's going well, you're going to get more of what's going well. I promise you. You're reinforcing the actions that you're looking for, the behaviors you're looking for, the outcomes you're looking for. And you're creating this amazing culture where excellence is just what we do. It's just the norm. It's how we do things around here. We do things great. When you've got that cockiness with your team, love it. They're the best because you're the best, my friend. So make sure you're keeping it on the positive sincerely, and it's to the standards and expectations clearly, and you're consistently making valuable deposits into the emotional bank account of your team members. And if this is the first time listening to one of these videos, I just will tell you about the emotional bank account. It's like with a financial bank account. These deposits, these positive deposits, build goodwill, trust, respect. Knowing that someday you're going to have to make a withdrawal and you want to have enough in that bank account where if you have to make a withdrawal, you're not depleting the account. Because you're going to have tougher conversations. At some point, that's inevitable. You're going to need to give developmental feedback, but you've got to be making more positive deposits into their bank accounts. And a good rule of thumb for sales managers, if you ever wonder, is to aim for a ratio of about 5-to-1. 5 pieces of positive feedback for every 1 piece of constructive developmental feedback. 5-to-1. Some people might argue that it's more than that, an 8-to-1, 10-to-1. Friends, if you're struggling with any of the symptoms we talked about earlier, and you can get to 5-to-1 on this, and because you're not there, it's common for managers to be looking for the tallest nail to pound because they're there to fix problems. And we bypass the whole mindset that maybe by only fixing problems, the reason why I'm doing that is because I haven't created the culture of accountability and knowledge and success that I needed to. And that comes from positive feedback. But they have to know what's going to get them positive feedback so that they get it. That's the accountability. When team members see that their efforts, their effective responsibilities and behaviors are being acknowledged by the boss, maybe even sometimes rewarded, it reinforces the value of those contributions and motivates them to maintain and elevate their performance. Catch them doing it right and tell them you caught them. They're going to love you for it. And you want them to have a high level of respect, very positive feelings about you because they work for you, they don't work for the company. In other words, reward the behaviors you seek. And that reward is just recognition. And it can come in many forms. It can be formal, it can be verbal, accolades, promotions, additional responsibilities, special projects, special training, certificates, trophies, postcards, be written on a bar nap, just any kind of recognition. And the key to ensure that the rewards are meaningful and align with your team's values and goals, make sure they understand what those behaviors are that you're looking for. Must be clear and undeniably recognizable. Because a culture that celebrates accountability and responsibility, they have that growth mindset. We can do anything and we can keep on taking more. We can accomplish more. That's that inertia we love. That's that graph we love. And when you're sitting down and talking about setting goals for them, this was in a previous tactic, include them in it. What are you going to sell this month? How many accounts are you going to open this month? How much are you going to grow your existing business? How many meetings are you going to set? Ask them. I'm telling you, when you've got this level of accountability and esprit de corps mindset with your team, they're going to set goals higher than you. They'll be very ambitious. They'll be willing to take on more calculated risk. And they won't view challenges as roadblocks. They'll see them as opportunities to learn and grow. I've seen this happen. This isn't nirvana. It's very achievable. Only with your contribution, and you're the major contributor to this. It's your efforts that's going to shift the mindset, which is crucial. You want to drive innovation. You want to create adaptability. And when things go bad, and they will, it's just a matter of time, your sales team will better navigate market changes and continue to meet customer needs. You'll be here when your competition is doing this, and you may come down a little bit. They're going to drop further because you've got that culture. You've created this beautiful culture that extends beyond just individual achievements. You're creating a culture of accountability that promotes a sense of camaraderie, mutual support. They're feeding off of each other. They need you less. That's a beautiful thing. Don't let your self-doubt or your self-esteem get in the way of making yourself dispensable. But it takes a lot of work to get there. As team members recognize that their success is all interlinked by all this collaborative environment, they're going to keep feeding each other advice, and you don't have to. They'll be helping each other out. Whoa, that's going to be beautiful. I've seen this happen many times. They'll start sharing each other's best practice. Hey, have you tried this? Let me show you how to do it. Making your job easier. Elevating your team's collective performance. Furthermore, a focus of recognizing and rewarding accountability will absolutely enhance the team's resilience. Because sales is a field that is often marked by setbacks. And the big one, the big R word, rejection. Rejection. Remember, you're fighting that morale killing thing every day. You can help them get less rejections, utilizing the proper behaviors. But they're going to get kicked in the knee every now and then. It's not if, it's when. How do they recover from that? How quickly do they heal and get back in the game? It's up to the culture you've created. Knowing that even this little setback, I'm going to be fine. Brush myself off. I'm going to get back in the game. Because they know when they're good enough, they're smart enough, people like them, and they know that their efforts are valuable to you. Even when you need immediate results, they know you're valuing what they're doing. Even in the situation where they've been set back a little bit, you've got the confidence. You're giving them the courage to get back in there and be successful, boosting their morale, encouraging persistence. I've written a whole book here now on recognition and the value of recognition and reward, of responsibility and accountability. This is just the next topic of which you need to include recognition. If you get really good at it, if you really have a strong mindset around positivity, you can shift your team's performance and mindset, making your job a whole lot easier. Let's talk about how to identify responsibility and accountability behaviors. In the context of sales, identifying specific behaviors associated with the responsibility and accountability is crucial for fostering this high-performance team we're driving for. And the behaviors are tangible manifestations of an individual's commitment to their role, their team, the broader organization. And you need to create and help them understand, but first you need to recognize and understand the behaviors that one you must display to nurture this positive culture, but also for them to make sure undoubtedly what behaviors you're looking for from them. Now, for you, one key behavior is the consistent meeting. One key behavior is the consistent meeting or exceeding of sales targets. This demonstrates their ability to contributing to the success. However, Responsibility and accountability go beyond just hitting the numbers. That's too simple. The big part and what many sales managers is an aha moment. It's not about the numbers. It's about the behaviors that go in that create the numbers. It's the inputs that will create the outputs that you seek. So you need to make sure that they all understand, you understand, they understand what's involved in the manner of which these targets are achieved. What's the how-to on all this? It's never more phone calls. It's what takes place during those phone calls. Do we have scripts? Do we have scripts that are properly written to drive the best phone conversations? Do we have presentation standards? Do we have processes? Do we have meeting standards? Do we have appointment standards? You do have written processes, right? Most don't. So don't feel horribly guilty, but you need standardized processes. That's foundational to this. If you're going to hold people accountable, you got to train to the accountability, and you cannot train to tribal knowledge. It's got to be written. It must be clear, and everybody must be doing it. That's the fairness. That's the culture of accountability. But within that process are the behaviors that fit in or demonstrated or required to achieve the outcomes, the KPIs. And you, one, need to know what those are, communicate those, set those as a standard. Everybody knows this is how we do it. And if you're following or they're following and displaying these key behaviors, as you've taught them, as you've held them accountable for during sales training classes, things like ethical selling and focusing on long-term customer support and relationships, always be playing the long game. Don't get too caught up in the short game. Hitting the number for the week, hitting the number just for the month, it's dangerous. It creates long-term ineffective behaviors. You can't have two standards, the written standard that you've taught and trained on, and one that's the, oh crap, we're not making our numbers, do this. We can't change the standards. Those standards that we've created and setting expectations for them are constantly making us drop them so that we can achieve a month-end goal. We need to be looking at our standards, making some adjustments to those. If you don't see your team collaborating and supporting each other, there's an opportunity for you. Set up the environment for your team during meetings to share insights, provide support to each other. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be the answer person. You don't have to have all the answers. They have them if you allow them to share them. It's how you conduct a meeting. And if your meeting is a dialogue, not a monologue, you're getting there. If your meeting is essentially 80% of you asking questions 20% of the time and 80% of them taking responsibility or sharing insights or sharing success stories, that's a good meeting. That's an effective sales meeting. If you've got a problem, you got a challenge, don't tell them what they need to do. Have them tell you what they're going to do. There's a bit of an Aikido flip in there, thanks to my old buddy, J.O. Love that guy. But if you can get them to tell you what they're going to do, infinitely more likely to go do that. We as humans are less likely to be told what to do and go do it. They may not understand it. They may not believe it's going to work. They may have issues with what you're telling them to do, or it doesn't apply to me. I don't need to do that. And if you're telling everybody to go fix something or do something, and there's one or two people, that's not an issue for them, you're insulting the people who are doing it right. That's a minefield when I'm telling people what to do in a meeting. You need to develop the habit, the leadership approach of being collaborative with your team, having them participate and share ideas with each other, share ideas with you. That builds this cohesive sales force. Now, underlying all of this, let's get into the dirt. There is a natural resistance to responsibility and accountability. I don't care what the position is, but especially in sales where you have a high ego person generally, resistance to responsibility. Most salespeople are in the high I category of a DISC profile. They're influencers, they're creative, they're outgoing, they're personable, but they don't like rules. They don't like rules at all. Believe me, I know. I'm one. They like independence. They like to be able to do things differently all the time. They like to be their own person, be creative. And knowing that you generally going to have a group that are made up of that kind of personality, for you, the leader, it's going to create some significant challenges to a collective approach to things. That's where you need to have their input. They're going to resist when you tell them, but if they tell you, even if there's nuances from person to person, they don't say exactly the same thing or write exactly the same email or present things exactly the same way. As long as it's following the general guidelines and is effective, it's creating the proper outcomes that we're looking for, which is advancing the sale to the next step. You're good. Can't be dramatically different. It needs to be somewhere in the box. So your box needs to be built based on what you know is realistic. Have them help you build the box. Knowing that people in general, but almost always salespeople, their resistance is often stems from a variety of factors. Fear of failure, very often a lack of understanding or a misunderstanding of what the expectations are. Or this is the downside of hiring people with experience. They've got a culture from a previous culture that they did it differently at that last place. And that's where their habit is. And if there's a lack of accountability about doing it the way we do it, it's hard to get them to break what they're, even if it's a bad habit, what they're habitual with. It's humans. Or sometimes we do things inadvertently that create a lack of respect for ourselves. Be aware of that. Be careful. It's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. If you will use that as a guiding force and you script yourself, you bring yourself down before you have difficult conversations with folks, you don't go in emotionally elevated, you're going to have better outcomes. I am included in the next thing I'm about to share with you, but it's a resistance or an avoidance of feedback, developmental feedback. Even at my ripe old age, to this day, it is ingrained in me, but I recognize that it's ingrained in me. And so when I get developmental feedback, either from a client or a peer, it attacks my self-esteem. Know that you're dealing with that, likely dealing with that, because that's the personality type that we are. Now, feedback when you're dealing with just pure laziness, shouldn't have hired that person. They shouldn't still be on your team. But acknowledging the human factor to all this, embracing the human factor, the feelings, the emotions, that's what you're managing and leading. And it's crucial for sales leaders to always be aiming to foster a high-performing and cohesive team, is approach it with keeping everybody's feelings in mind. You're going to have to give them developmental feedback. You're going to have to course correct every now and then. You can't avoid it. But if you're giving developmental feedback and you get some resistance, don't pop your cork. Don't get frustrated. Understand what you're dealing with. Stop. Think. If I'm getting that resistance, where is this coming from? What's causing this resistance? Rarely is it because they just disagree. It's because you're attacking their emotions somehow. Maybe inadvertently, often inadvertently. So it's really important for you to keep in mind before I have a conversation, how's this going to affect them? And it's not one size fits all. You want to have difficult conversations with different people differently. And if you're getting this resistance, what's causing this? Is it fairness? Is somebody else getting away with this that I'm calling this person out on? How long have I allowed this person to perform like this and I haven't said anything? Do they really not know what's expected of them? What is it? Did I do something to them that created a break in the trust, the relationships? Or maybe it's some level of fear. Fear is an acronym, false expectations appearing real. That's the catastrophic mindset that we all possess to one degree or another. And very often when somebody's resisting feedback, they're resisting change. So they fear change. And in fearing this change, false expectations appearing real, they've predetermined what some outcome might be. It's up to you to create a clearer picture for them, help them realize what it is, but they're fearing failure, or they just don't understand, or they think they're already doing it, or they think your way won't work, or they think their way is better. They've tried it and it didn't work. That's what they're resisting. And we could spend an hour just talking about this and where that comes from. But these are the reasons why people don't do what they're supposed to do. Generally, it's some amount of bad habit that has been broken. And you, in order to get them to change, must understand that it's really important for you to have the relationship, the professional relationship of mutual trust and respect, and be able to have the conversations the right way. So if you are resistant to giving feedback because of the resistance you've gotten in the past, I get it. Why do I want to keep doing that when I keep getting hit in the head with it? Very uncomfortable for you. I get it. But how do some people do it so well? And you may be struggling with it. So walk into the bathroom, look in the mirror, stare at yourself, and ask, why? Why is this person resistant? And what have I potentially done to create it? Our instincts are that person's just a hardhead. They don't want to change. They're difficult to deal with. They're a difficult person. They're disagreeable all the time. They argue with everything. There's certainly some truth to all of those. But you got to understand, have I built a relationship with them? Is there mutual trust and respect with each other? In order to gain trust, we must grant trust. In order to gain respect, we must grant respect, give respect. And if you're constantly hitting a wall in disagreement with somebody, you got to ask yourself, and I have this conversation frequently, are they the right fit? Have you given them enough time? Have I done my part? Or are they just no way this person's ever going to do it? I just had this conversation last week with another company because the leader believes that they've done everything right. And if I've done A to Z, and it's this person's still difficult and not performing, we've just hired the wrong person, put them in the seat. That's where hiring slow and firing fast is really important, because they're going to show up as not a good fit early on. That's accountability. You don't want somebody that's going to buck your standards, expectations, buck you. Everybody else sees that. I did say buck. They're bucking you all the time. They're pushing back on everything. They're disagreeable. Your other team's going to see that. They may pick up on some of that. That you allowing that may give them the right to start pushing back on you more often or disrespectfully. I can't remember one time in my decades of management experience that somebody that was a problem in the first 30 to 45 days ever came out of it. They were a problem at 90 days. They were a problem at 9 months. They were a problem all the way through. You can't accept that. They're not going to get better. I know you hate hiring people. I know you hate not having a butt in that seat to handle that territory or those clients, but you're better off having a hole than an asshole. So keep that in mind. You're better off your customers talking to you, or to be not even talked to if you've got a person that's not doing it right. You're eroding the future. Remember, I talked about the long game. You're eroding the future relationship creating doubt, a lack of what the customer's looking for, them being bought into you, your company, what you deliver, your product. Are they loyal? That loyalty is generally, it's pretty far spread, but the first point of contact is your sales rep. And if this sales rep is not a good fit, please do something about it quickly. And I can also tell you it happens, but it rarely happens that somebody's really good and they get bad. If that happens, something about what I've been talking about here has occurred. It's not generally something they did, something you did. Now, they may have pressure at home, maybe things out of your control. Things may be going bad at home. They may have issues, financial issues, health issues, spouse issues, whatever. You can't control that. But when they're at work, you can be their biggest supporter. You can be their biggest promoter, and you can make sure where it's coming from. Make sure that we're always keeping in mind the emotional part of this, the feelings part of this, and don't jump to conclusions too quickly. Don't ever do this. Don't just knee jerk into an opinion that they're just being a pain in the butt. Stop. When they're being a pain in the butt, it's always something more. Go there in your conversation. Instead of saying, why are you being a butthead? Oh, I see you're a little worked up about this. And we need to get through this for us to move forward. Where is this coming from? What's happened? I'm here for your success. We're only successful if you're successful. And this isn't an attack. And if I've given you that feeling, I got to tell you, I apologize. So let's talk this through. Why are you giving me this feedback, this resistance? Because I'm here to help. And if I've done something wrong, tell me so I can own it and fix it. But then we've got to talk about what you need to do differently, because you don't want to be suffering either. Go there in your conversation. And well, as I've said before, don't get caught up with just telling them what they must improve, how to improve it in some monologue. Waste of your time. They're not listening or they're not understanding. Ask them, get their opinions, open-ended question. And one of the primary reasons for resistance, again, is the fear of failure and its consequences. Sales is a high-pressure world, and they may not be meeting their targets, but it's funny how we are really comfortable with our bad habits. You got to break them of that. And they fear change for some reason. And this fear is exasperated in environments where mistakes are met with harsh criticism rather than a constructive level of feedback, getting support. Often, resistance is created by how you have created that culture, that environment. If you inadvertently, you don't do it on purpose, inadvertently created an inappropriate environment, you'll know when your team is constantly blame shifting or avoiding of the behaviors you're looking for, arguing with you, or passive aggression, maybe undermining accountability. There's poor team dynamics. Don't fall into that trap, completely controlled by you. In order for them to care, you must show them how much you care. I've heard so many times, they just don't seem to care. I hate to tell you, it's probably because you haven't shown them how much you care. You haven't been making the deposits in the emotional bank account. You haven't been supportive and encouraging to them. Resistance generally, not always, but generally comes from not enough deposits into the emotional bank account. And another thing when you're getting resistance is ambiguity. When sales team members are unclear as to what's expected of them. If you're constantly changing or moving the goalposts as to what's expected, that's going to frustrate them. It's going to create confusion, and it's going to create a lack of ownership. Depends on the day, what this sales manager expects. You're changing the goals all the time, changing expectations all the time. Without clear goals, metrics, feedback mechanisms, standards, processes, constant feedback, it's super challenging for an individual to gauge their performance and understand what's expected of them. And as I said previously, your team must know when they come to work, how to have a good day. When they go home, they must know if they had a good day, and maybe you need to be part of that. And historically, a lack of accountability or selective accountability. It's generally they're not running amok. It's sometimes selective. They're choosing what they're going to follow, some that they're not. But this lack of accountability or selective accountability will perpetuate a culture where low performance or negative behaviors become tolerated, and they will only behave like this because you allowed it. That's you being proactive. When you see a little smoke, there's going to be a fire. Address it early. Get in front of it. Because once they get into the habit, the bad habit, that's a cycle that is really hard to break. So you need to be proactive. Very often people think they're being kind or caring by not giving someone developmental feedback. And you're actually being cruel. You're keeping information that they vitally need in order to perform at the level you expect. They want to come have a good day. And if they've fallen into the trap or the habits that are ineffective, it's up to you to see it and take the appropriate steps to redirect it. Because if you're not very clear about your expectations, it becomes implied expectations. And that doesn't work very well. So accountability, success all comes with a steady and predictable standard of holding your team members accountable day in and day out. It can't be just what mood you're in. You need to be very predictable on the positive side. So understanding that as you're holding people accountable, often it's a shift of their status quo, what they're used to. And you're facing one of life's most difficult things, and that's changing habits. The goal, once again, don't allow them to get into that habit. You'll make your life much easier. Be proactive, be fair, provide the training, provide the feedback for development, set goals, have regular discussions on how they're achieving those goals. What are the behaviors, rewarding those behaviors? What are your expectations? They need to know clearly what's expected of them, and that will mitigate this resistance. But if you're getting the resistance, you need to address the causes of this resistance. And something to keep in mind is you need to lead by example. It's a fundamental principle in any kind of leadership, but especially sales management. The idea that actions speak louder than words. Now, as a sales manager, you play a very pivotal role in setting that standard and that responsibility and that accountability by you walking the talk. The way a manager approaches challenges, celebrates success, handles failures, that sets a powerful precedent for how the team conducts themselves. If you're displaying a very strong work ethic, they will. If you've got their back and supporting them, they'll support you. They'll support each other. If you celebrate and take confidence and show confidence in them, they'll show confidence in you. And a sales manager who consistently meets their own targets, team targets, and adheres to company policies and demonstrates the ethical selling practices by providing this living blueprint for your team to follow. You're not constantly changing the expectations. Just get this day in or this week done. It's really important. How open are you to feedback? How defensive are you when confronted with feedback? What's good for the goose? Keep that in mind. It's a commitment to excellence and integrity, which takes on many different applications. But in sales, it's a tangible demonstration of what is valued. They need to know what's valued. You must support that. Never violate that. And if you sometimes or frequently act in inappropriate ways, not going to work for you. But if you are walking the talk, you're towing the line, you're encouraging them to emulate it. It reinforces the importance of these actions and expectations, and that gets integrated into your culture. You as their leader, their manager, your approach to accountability, how you own up to mistakes, how you seek feedback, how you strive for continuous improvement. They see you getting training or talk about the most recent training, the most recent thing you've learned and are now applying it. You'll set a tone for them. You'll help them set areas for growth. If they see that you're a constant learner and looking to improve yourself, they're going to want to do the same thing because they'll see the value through your own improvement. Your commitment, they'll get the same commitment. If in fact they bring you constructive feedback and you really take it to heart and make the proper steps to correct it, that's awesome because you expect the same of them. If you're approachable, your door's open, just as you expect of them, but you display a level of self-reflection and accountability. Sales leaders, as any leader, it's really hard for us to understand that my team's just not bad. There are no bad teams. There's something the leader's doing or not doing that's creating the ineffective team. It's a hard one to swallow. But when you're towing the line, you're holding people accountable. Someone's not performing, you're either fixing them or getting them down the road. That's going to build the trust with your team. Their expectations are clear and enforced and regular and don't change often. You're creating a culture of excellence, integrity, continuous improvement, that we can do anything culture. It's a style that engenders respect and fosters that positive team dynamic you're looking for. It drives higher levels of performance, ultimately contributes to the success of the team and the organization as a whole.